Are we connected?
We're connected. Go ahead.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:30. Welcome our guest. And first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I should have a motion.
We approve the agenda.
Motion from Sean, second from Mark. Discussion. All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, motion carries. Okay, we have nobody from open forum, but I have a statement from the last open forum. We had Kurt Baker and Carol Branson speak to us. So let me start by saying that support of the Lynn Athletic Boosters is an important partner to our athletic program and reflects on the success of the program. The contributions of time, energy, and leadership of the officers are acknowledged and greatly appreciated. After listening to the information provided by Mr. Kurt Baker and Mrs. Carol Branson, I can see that we have a communication problem between the school, Booster Club, and the coaches. To correct this problem, when the new athletic director comes on board in August, he will be tasked with working closely with the Athletic Booster Club officers and developing a workable plan for support of the athletic program. Coordinating with the Booster Club is necessary and will be included as part of the athletic director's monthly report to the board. Moving on to approval of the consent agenda, which also has the regular minutes from the last meeting.
We approve the consent agenda.
Motion by Sean, second by Naomi. All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, the consent agenda is approved. Now moving item 5, approval of transfer and payment of bills. You have any questions on them?
We approve the transfer and payment of bills.
Motion by Sean. I have a second.
I'll second.
Second by Mark. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, motion carries. Reports, superintendent's report.
You do have my report in your folder, so I won't spend a whole lot of time, going over the whole thing. I did put in that first section, the specific areas that high school, middle school, elementary school will be working on this year for curriculum and assessments, and we will continue to be part of the DCI process through our local RPDC. And so the elementary is specifically focusing on math curriculum while also focusing on the science of reading, and Tracy has talked to you about that. And then high school will continue to work on their formative assessment piece. And then we have our registration schedule, preschool screening, wellness fair, new student enrollment, all of that is set up. So you do have that listed there in your report, and it's also going to run in the UD and the News Tribune. Krista Schmitz has been hired by Fresh Ideas as the food service director, so she will start around the first part of August. We do have all open positions within the district filled at this time, so that's nice to have completed. And then again, just the maintenance and custodial staff, summertime is their busy time of the year, and they're doing a great job. They're on track to have everything waxed so teachers can start getting in their rooms around the first part of August, and teachers always appreciate that. Part of our discussion later will be on the elementary HVAC system as well. And then we did do the infrared scan of the high school roof. There were only 5 areas with wet insulation, so that's going to keep us from having to do an entire tear off and be able to sink the rest of the roof. Next month, we will have the synopsis and report of all the maintenance projects that have been completed this summer. So you'll have a more detailed in-depth view of that.
Thank you. Moving into discussion items, item 7.1, reapprove policy 0342, nepotism, conflict of interest, and financial disclosure.
This is just required every 2 years to keep all of you and all of us from having to file a personal financial disclosure form with the Missouri Ethics Commission. So we have to re-adopt that policy every 2 years, and we did it in 2019, so it's due again now.
I move we approve policy 42, pending that the conflict of interest and financial disclosure.
I have a motion from Mark. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Naomi. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 5-0. 7.2, second reading of regulations. Does anybody have any input or changes that they've noticed, notified or noticed in the 1420, 2310 and 4320 for any changes?
I had a couple of questions about the employee leave, the line that's being added there. And this might, we may have discussed this at the last meeting, and I did the proper notes, or I've slept since then, but so which employees does this addition pertain to? Because if I understand right, like most teachers are not, this is pertaining to 12 employees employed on a 12-month basis.
Right.
So who would that be?
It would be all
So
of
that I
us.
understand better.
I'm sorry, I didn't make that correct.
That's okay.
It would be all of us in central office, and then custodial and maintenance staff are the only one.
Okay.
And Terry Shepherd and Megan Niederhelm
Oh, yeah.
were the only 12-month employees of the district.
Okay. And then I guess my only concern is, and I'm just thinking about places that I've worked, usually, at least in my experience, places that I've worked, they let you carry over at least a few days, not the whole thing. And I worry about this being a employee morale issue. That's just my concern.
We only have one employee right now who has accrued any time, so I don't think it's going to be an issue because they tend to use them in the year in which
Okay.
they get them anyway. It's just with nothing in policy, we didn't have anything that kept them from accruing. If down the road we had somebody and they wanted to accrue however many days. And I actually took the language directly from the old policy, because it used to be in policy, and somewhere along the way, through various revisions, it just got left out. And that's exactly what it used to say, but that's,
I was just worried about adverse effects, unintended consequences.
sure.
I also didn't want there to be people that take all of their days for funerals and things, so. Because I've worked in places where that happens and it really stinks.
It does.
They save them till the week at the end of the year. and
Yes.
Everybody's gone at the last week of the year.
When you need it.
Yes.
So, okay.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
On regulation 1420, that line will be added that says at no time will the weight room or the indoor batting cage be available for use by outside groups or individuals.
Mhm.
I wonder about adding that, because there might be times in the future where we have outside baseball teams that want to use our batting cages. And I don't know if we really want to add this in our policy, because it might reduce our flexibility with what we want to do in the future, because we'll ultimately have the deciding factor on whether we're going to let a user or an individual use those anyway. So I don't know if we really need to add that to our regulation.
Up to you guys.
That's just my thought on it.
The insurance language, that's on the agreement, not on the policy.
That's on the agreement.
Okay,
And I didn't bring that back this month because I'm still waiting to hear back from some insurance
Okay.
companies.
thank you.
And I can't help but wonder too, if we're really worried if we have good enough insurance, because it seems to me like a liability waiver should be enough if we have good enough insurance with the school. I kind of agree with what Dr. Strong said last time.
So is the consensus that you want that line not in there or left in there?
It does seem kind of odd that we just picked that one out to add.
Yeah, we had talked about that at one meeting because the weight room and batting cage had the potential to cause more injury than if you're just shooting hoops in the gym.
For instance, if somebody's by themselves and they go in the weight room and they're lifting too much, if they lose track of what they're lifting and end up with it sitting on their chest.
But an attendant, I mean, attendant could be anybody. It doesn't have to, it doesn't say it's got to be an employee.
No, it doesn't.
It does say approved by the board, which seems like a little bit of overkill to me, but because we don't want to, if we start, I mean, I suspect the weight room will become a more active place.
I'm sure it probably will.
And then I wonder if we'll start having volunteer parents or something like that.
Definitely, I'd say it's very possible.
And
So
so
take that last line out.
I'm just wondering, well, and even unless you don't want, if you want that language approved by the board, I mean, I guess we can leave it, but are we gonna be, anytime we have a volunteer parent, are we gonna have to approve it?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah, so that's a lot of approving potentially.
It maybe limits our flexibility if we don't really have to have that in there.
Uh-huh.
Like if the coach gets sick and they call a parent, I wouldn't want you to have to say, no, we can't do that because the board hasn't approved it.
Okay.
And if you
so-
take this literally, I mean, we're gonna have to approve it before you can let them use it.
Take out approved by the board and then take out that last sentence. Is that what I'm understanding?
As long as you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, that's fine with me. I mean, I know what you're saying. That could be an issue going forward.
Yeah.
Okay, no further discussion. We'll move on to 7.3, approval of propane bids.
So you have the propane bids there. MFA oil did come in as the lowest at $1.23 per gallon. Three Rivers is our current propane supplier. It has been for 30+ years. Using the total number of gallons that we used this year, which was approximately 8,150, and applying next year's price to them, the difference in the two would be approximately $489. If we go with MFA oil, they will have to change out our tanks. But that is part of their bid. I mean, that's part of what they bid on. So we just have to decide.
The only thing you end up with though is, I don't know how much propane we'll lose changing tanks because they can't drain them completely. So you're gonna lose a certain number of gallons each tank. Well, will it be $400? Probably not.
How many tanks do we have? 5.
Are they all in one central location?
Not completely. There's some out by the ag building because that is propane out there, but then they're behind the kitchen. So not spread out
No, no.
everywhere.
No, the biggest user is probably the greenhouse.
Yeah, it is.
Looks to me like you have to change.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I said. Why go out for bid if you're not gonna?
Yeah, it looks to me like you gotta change.
Well, and the other thing, it'll make Three Rivers take a closer look at their bid next year if they don't get this year.
Yeah, luckily this is a 1-year thing, so.
Right. It is. We could be changing tanks out every year for a few years.
I think they do that quite often though.
It's not unusual for that to happen, I don't think. so.
I do know when I was down the boatyard, we bid out propane every time we had to have fill, and MFA always seemed to have the lower price. That would have been out of Herman.
Yeah.
And Feral Gas always seemed to be way on the high end for some reason. And the problem I used to have with Three Rivers is they wouldn't accept a credit card for payment, so we couldn't even use them. Whatever your pleasure is.
No, I think we go with or which our taxpayers to take this in. It's a big enough difference.
Need a motion?
Yep.
I move that we approve Three Rivers as our propane,
MFA,
MFA is our
sorry.
propane provider for the upcoming year.
Okay, I have a motion from Sean. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second from Hannah. Motion is made and seconded to approve MFA oil as our propane provider at a rate of $1.23 a gallon. Any further discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0. Motion carries. Next item is to set the tuition rate.
In order to figure what your tuition rate needs to be set out, there's a worksheet, and I did include that in your folder so you can see how I came up with the number of $8,700. This year it's $8,300. And so my recommendation is to raise it to the $8,700, and that's per student for the year, which is an increase of $400. Right now, we don't have anybody paying tuition, but we still have to set a tuition rate should we have anybody who wanted to come here and pay tuition.
Did we have one last year? And this year
Yes.
We don't have any.
Yes.
On those spreadsheet, what was the first tab? What was the difference between the first tab and the second tab? Because the bottom line on the first tab, just so I understood it. I didn't print the tab, the labels on the tabs didn't print. So.
So that first tab would have been if we didn't know the actual expenditures, if we were just estimating what we spent last year. And the second tab is if we know what our expenditures actually were for
Okay.
last year.
Because the first one was like 6882.
And I should have gone back and deleted those numbers because I started filling that one out and then realized, wait a minute, this is the estimate one. And so I didn't finish it and went to the right tab and didn't think about going back and deleting those numbers. So that's my fault. I
Oh, no,
apologize.
that's fine. It's
Uh,
kind of interesting.
But that's what the difference is.
I was kind of curious if somebody would choose to pay tuition, would they be eligible for athletics immediate next year or ever eligible?
They might be the following year. They wouldn't be next year because they haven't had a full family move into the district.
Okay.
And so they would be ineligible by initial standards.
Okay, if there's no more questions, I need a motion to approve the tuition rate at $8,700.
Move we accept the proposed tuition rate.
Motion from Mark. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second from Sean. All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0. Motion carries. Next item up is to set the milk and lunch prices.
Next year, we are going to be eligible to participate in the seamless summer option for the school year. So our kids will receive free breakfast and lunch next year all year again. Because of that, when there's a tool every year that we have to fill out that's called the paid lunch equity tool. And that tells us whether or not we have to raise our lunch prices. And when I asked Desi about whether or not we had to complete that tool if we're participating in seamless summer, they said, no, you don't even have to do that, just as your price is the same as they are this year and move forward.
Approve the suggested lunch and milk prices for the 2021-2022 school year.
Okay, I have a motion from Mark,
I'll second.
second from Hannah. All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0. That motion carries. Now we have the approval of date and time for tax rate hearing.
We do have to have public hearings for our tax rate every year. In the past, we've always done that on the regular board meeting night, just right. You actually have to have a separate meeting, so you enter into that meeting, take care of that business, close that meeting and enter into another meeting. But we always have just done it right at 6:30 on the night of the regular board meeting. So that's what I recommended.
And we do have to publish it in the paper so the
Right.
public knows.
I move that we set the date and time for the tax hearing at the next, to be held at during or before the next board meeting.
Motion from Sean, do I have a second? Second from Mark. All in favor, raise your right hand. 5-0, motion carries. Elementary,
So as you guys know, we've had two pretty significant leaks in our HVAC system at the elementary. And I brought this because I wanted to show you exactly what's happening. This is 5 years old, and we've already got this much corrosion happening. And what was explained to me is we've got aluminum piping, steel piping, and copper piping. And so then as it gets hot and cold, and moisture condenses on there, causes electrolysis. And that's what's causing this to happen. And this is throughout the whole elementary building. And so they just replaced 2 sections of pipe that we had some significant leaks in. So what they told me was, we can keep fixing these leaks as they come up, but in 5 years, you're going to be in a world of trouble. So I had asked them a couple months ago, can you shoot me a ballpark price of what it would cost to just redo the piping? Because the other problem is when it was done, it wasn't insulated efficiently. And where normally you have hangers that hold your pipes up, they didn't do any of those hangers. So those pipes are also, hanging down. Yeah, saggy. And so last time they were here, they said, we've talked about it in the office, and our ballpark price without measuring anything, it's going to cost about $150,000 to repipe the system. He said, but I can tell you, if you don't do it now, in 5 years, you're not only going to have spent a significant amount repairing these leaks as you go. Plus, when you repair a leak, you have to take down that whole system because you have to drain it, repair it, recharge it, pressure check it, whole 9 yards. And so typically school has to be out to do that. But in the meantime, you have to keep charging it because it's leaking. So you're spending additional money on Freon, but you have to keep putting it in there. So it's just this vicious cycle. I guess what I'm asking you guys is, are you okay with me moving forward with asking them to come in and do an actual estimate? They're gonna have to measure everything out, look at materials and costs, labor, all of that, so that we can possibly move forward. I mean, now's probably the time to do it because we have ESSER money. In 5 years, we may not have that additional money. And knowing what it looks like after 5 years, I'm afraid we're really in for a mess.
The heating and cooling in this new elementary has never been quite right.
It hasn't. And the nice thing about Butzer is they are very knowledgeable about this system. So they have come in and really helped us get the settings. Part of it was that it wasn't programmed correctly when it was installed. So that was part of the problem. But then now we've got this problem on top of it, which is just, and then another problem, right at the end of summer school, we had a big storm, one of those big storms. So it took out the motherboard on one of our units. So they're having to replace that. That same storm took out the control panel of our fire alarm system at the high school. So that's also having to be repaired. Now, those may be covered by insurance. I'm waiting to see what those two cost to see if it's worth turning into insurance or not. But anyway, this is one of our biggest problems right now. So are you guys okay with me moving forward with asking them to give us a firm quote? Because we will want to get on their books for the beginning of next summer, because they'll have to take down the whole elementary school in sections in order to do that.
Who did the original work?
Steerco?
Circle was the general contract.
Okay.
HVAC, I don't know who the HVAC.
Look that up, Sean. I will send it to you. I don't know.
Wonder if they would feel any obligation to us.
I can
make it
definitely
right.
reach out and contact them and see, and just tell them what we're going through.
They should have,
Because it's only been 5 years.
yeah, they should have. I mean, I see what's happening. They should have isolated it with. Although I can't tell what that is. It looks like they might have. I mean, there might be. Rubber, is that rubber
Yeah.
under? Sure, why not?
I'll share my show and tell.
Put up for bid.
Not as a repair.
Okay.
If it were a construction project, yes, but since it's a repair, it doesn't have to be.
I mean, I understand why you'd want to go with who's already spent a long time helping us get by, but, and they've been good, and I know they're a good company.
And I can reach out to other places and have them come in and give us an estimate as well.
If it's that big, I would recommend that. But I mean, it is, I mean, I can see the rubber fittings. They isolated it. They did it right. That makes me ask, what are they gonna do different?
What they told me was they would use all of the same
One metal.
Same
metal,
metal.
which would keep electrolysis from happening, which is what's caused the corrosion.
And they can't just replace this chunk. I mean, it's the copper, it looks like it's the copper pipe that's reacting.
My
And
other,
it's just a push, I mean, it's just a push
I can
fitting.
ask,
I don't know.
I don't know either. I can certainly ask them and see if that's an option, is just to replace the copper pieces. And then, and I can reach out to other companies who can also come in and give us an estimate on what they think needs to be done.
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't,
And that's the thing, especially with HVAC, you're so, I mean, not everybody knows HVAC, so you're so tied to what they tell you because
Sure.
you don't know. So, all right, I will reach out to some companies and try to get some estimates going on that.
Okay, moving on to announcements. Our next regular meeting will be August 17th in this room at 6:30. And I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session, approve the closed session minutes.
I move we adjourn and go into closed session.
Okay,
Let me read all this.
it has to be the revised statute and then you can,
Okay.
That's why I didn't volunteer.
Yeah. Go into closed session to discuss topics allowed in revised statute 610.021. Personnel matters, personal records, legal, students.
I have a motion from Mark. Do I have a second? Second from Naomi. Roll call vote. Mark,
Yes.
Hannah,
Yes.
Naomi,
Yes.
Sean,
Yes.
yes for me. Motion carries. Thank you for coming to visit, Carol.
I'll do that.
You're always welcome.
Dennis, can you, sign- that's what I have to send you, so I text.
Okay. I can do that.